Preface: Isla Hart had always known her place in the Eclipse Moon Pack, silent, skilled, and unseen, but everything shattered the day Alpha Cade Thornheart publicly rejected her, declaring her unworthy to be his mate and the Pack's Luna. Humiliated and betrayed, she fled, leaving the only home she'd ever known, carrying the weight of heartbreak and the sting of jealousy as Cade took Mora, the girl who had tormented Isla since childhood, into his arms. 5 years later, tragedy calls her back. Her mother's illness forces Isla to return to the pack she once escaped, but the homecoming is anything but peaceful. The forests of the pack are darker, the shadows deeper, and whispers of betrayal and hidden agendas snake through the ranks. As she rises to become a respected warrior, Isla finds herself entangled in the delicate threads of power, trust, and vengeance. Cade, still grappling with the consequences of his choices, is forced to confront the regret he buried beneath his pride. The bond that once bound them pulses with unresolved tension, hinting that what was lost may not be gone forever. As secrets unravel and enemies close in, Isla must navigate her past and the magnetic pull of her mate, deciding whether to reclaim the love she once lost or forge her own destiny, independent of him. In a world where loyalty is tested, love is dangerous, and forgiveness is a battlefield, one truth becomes undeniable: some bonds, though broken, are never truly severed. Chapter 1. Return to the Eclipse Moon. The night air pressed against Isla Hart like a velvet shroud, thick with the scent of pine and distant rain. Her boots sank slightly into the damp forest floor as she approached the gates of the Eclipse Moon Pack, the towering walls silhouetted under the silver glow of the full moon. Years had passed since she had fled these lands, yet every creak of the ancient timber and every whisper of wind through the branches reminded her of the humiliation she had endured. The public rejection by Alpha Cade Thornheart, the burning shame of being cast aside as unworthy of her fated bond. Her heart thudded, not from fear of returning, but from the weight of the memories she had carried. Each step was a battle between the desire to run and the necessity of facing the pack she had left behind. Her senses were sharp, attuned to the subtle signs of movement, creatures stirring, shadows shifting, the faint tremor of magic in the air that only someone like her, part wolf, part human, could detect. The gates loomed before her, wrought iron twisting like claws against the night sky. She paused, inhaling deeply. The scent of the pack hit her, first wolves marking their territory, mingling with the lingering traces of humans who had lived in this domain for generations. Among them, a presence tugged at the edge of her awareness, familiar yet distant, a pulse she could not ignore. Cade. Her memories of him were fractured, the hard lines of his jaw, the controlled power of his movements, and the storm of emotions behind his storm. Gray eyes the night he had rejected her. She had left, had promised herself never to return, yet fate had called her back, not by desire, but by duty. Her mother's illness demanded her presence, and the pack had changed in her absence. The shadows she once knew had deepened, secrets whispered among walls that seemed alive with the pack's pulse. A low growl rumbled in the distance. Isla's ears twitched instinctively, her senses stretching into wolf form even as her human mind clung to composure. She was no longer the scared, obedient girl she had been. Years in exile, honing her abilities, surviving the world outside the pack, had forged her into someone dangerous, someone not to be dismissed. The gates opened silently, as if recognizing her presence. Cade stood on the other side, his posture straight, the alpha aura around him undeniable even in the muted light. His eyes met hers, gray and storm-tossed, reflecting both recognition and a flicker of something she could not yet name. "Isla," he said, his voice low, controlled, an edge of tension threading through it. "You shouldn't have come back." Her lips pressed into a thin line, a smirk threatening the surface. "I had no choice. Cade, my mother, she needs me." He studied her, and for the first time since their separation, she felt the unspoken words lingering between them. The regrets, the mistakes, the bond that neither rejection nor time had fully severed. Shadows of the past clung to them, but so did the dangerous possibility of something more, something neither of them could deny. Even now, a movement behind him drew her gaze, wolves of the pack, alert and tense, observing her return with suspicion. The night seemed to hold its breath. Every sound, every flicker of shadow felt magnified. Isla stepped forward, boots crunching on the gravel, her pulse steadying. I didn't come back for you, Cade. I came back for my family, and for the truth I need to uncover. Cade's jaw tightened. Truth has a way of hurting those who seek it. She didn't flinch, then let it hurt. The forest held its silence, the wind stilled, and the pack watched. Something had shifted, something unspoken ready to ignite, a confrontation that would test loyalty, awaken power, and force them both to reckon with the bond that neither had ever truly escaped. The shadows of the past and the promises of the night collided, and Isla knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. Isla's footsteps echoed faintly against the stone corridor of the Eclipse Moon Pack's fortress, each step a reminder that she was walking into a world she had once fled. The air was thick with the scent of moss and cold iron, mingling with the faint musk of wolves that roamed beyond the walls. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering in the torchlight, and Isla's pulse quickened, not from fear but from anticipation. Her hand brushed against the rough stone as she passed, grounding herself in the tactile reality of the pack she had once called home. Memories clawed at her, Cade's smoldering gaze, the sting of rejection, the humiliation before the assembled pack. Yet beneath it all, a current of something unresolved pulsed, a bond neither of them had fully severed, tethering her to a past she had tried desperately to outrun. The great hall lay ahead, silent but alive with expectation. Wolves padded along the walls, their ears twitching, eyes alert. The pack had changed in her absence. Older faces now bore the weight of experience. Younger ones held curiosity mixed with wariness. Whispers seemed to brush against her consciousness. Fragments of gossip she couldn't fully hear but could sense like currents under the water. She stepped into the hall, letting her presence announce itself subtly. The Alpha Council sat at the far end, their eyes narrowing in unison as they regarded her. Cade rose from his seat, his posture unyielding, shoulders squared, yet his storm-gray eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise she hadn't expected. "Isla," he said, his voice steady but layered with tension, "you're here against my counsel, I see." "I'm here because I must be," she replied, her voice carrying through the hall without wavering. "My mother is ill, and I won't leave her side. The pack comes second to that." Cade's jaw tightened, the rigid lines of authority softened only by a shadow of something more intimate, something neither word nor gesture could fully articulate. "You've grown," he said, the observation casual but laced with an undercurrent of appraisal. "Not just in age, in strength. You're no longer the girl who fled under humiliation." Isla's lips twitched into a brief, controlled smile. "Number I'm not, and I won't be dismissed again." The council murmured among themselves, the low hum of judgment and curiosity threading through the room. Eyes followed her, some wary, others intrigued. The unspoken tension was palpable, the unacknowledged history between her and Cade, the unresolved echoes of the fated bond that neither time nor distance had erased. "Isla," Cade continued, stepping closer, the magnetic force of his presence pressing against her consciousness. "You must understand, returning here is dangerous. There are forces at work within and outside this pack. Not everything is as it seems." Her fingers brushed the hilt of the dagger she carried, a habitual gesture of readiness. Danger had been her constant companion in exile, and she had learned the hard way that trust was earned, not given. "Then let danger come," she said softly yet firmly. "I can face it. I've survived worse than fear." Cade's gaze softened, a flicker of something she couldn't name, regret, concern, longing passing over his features. "And yet, I wonder if you truly understand what you're walking back into. The pack is fractured, old loyalties have shifted, and threats linger in the shadows." Isla's eyes narrowed slightly. "I understand more than you think, and I will find the truth whatever it costs." A low growl resonated from the shadows near the hall's entrance. Wolves stirred, ears twitching, and even the council tensed. The threat was not abstract, it was immediate, a reminder that the Eclipse Moon Pack's world was always perched on the edge of chaos. Cade's hand brushed against the hilt of his own blade, a silent acknowledgment of the danger, and Isla felt the familiar pull of the bond that neither time nor rejection had dulled. It tugged at her instincts, whispering of proximity, of power, of connection, and something deeper unresolved. She took a measured step forward, meeting his gaze squarely. "I am not here to reignite old wounds," she said, the words deliberate. "I am here to survive, to protect, and to uncover what has been hidden." Cade's storm gray eyes held hers for a long moment, unspoken truths lingering in the space between them. Finally he inclined his head, a gesture both warning and acknowledgment. "Then we walk the shadows together for now." The tension in the hall seemed to tighten, shadows stretching longer, as if the walls themselves sensed the collision of past and present. Isla felt the weight of history pressing against her, but beneath it, a spark of something unanticipated flickered, an ember of potential, of connection, of power she was only beginning to understand. Outside, the wind stirred the forest, carrying the scent of danger, blood, and wolves. Inside, the hall remained silent, save for the unspoken promise that the confrontation with the past had only just begun. Chapter 3: Shadows of Betrayal. Isla left the great hall with a measured stride, her boots echoing against the cold stone floor. Each step carried the weight of memories she had tried to bury: Cade's rejection, Mora's manipulations, the scorn of the pack she had once called home. Yet now, walking through the familiar corridors, a strange clarity settled over her. The past might shape her, but it would not define her. The evening air outside the fortress was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder of the forested territory that had once been her playground and battlefield alike. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting fragmented shadows that danced like phantoms on the ground. Isla paused, closing her eyes to take in the familiar grounding smells of wolf musk, wet leaves, and smoke from distant campfires. Her senses, heightened from years of survival, drank in the world around her, alert to every movement, every whisper of danger. She wasn't alone. A low, cautious growl drew her gaze to a figure stepping from the underbrush. Cade emerged from the shadows, his presence commanding, a silent force against the quiet of the forest. His storm-gray eyes met hers, unreadable but intense. "You didn't wait for me," he said, voice calm but edged with something that stirred the air between them. "I didn't need an escort," she replied evenly, her hand brushing the hilt of her dagger. "I can navigate these woods as well as any wolf in this pack." Cade's lips twitched, almost a smile. "That's what worries me." He stepped closer, and Isla felt the invisible tug of their bond, subtle, insistent, impossible to ignore. It threaded through her nerves like electricity, reminding her of the connection they shared, a connection forged long before betrayal had severed trust. "I'm not here to reignite old conflicts," Isla said, her voice firm, but the tremor she tried to hide betrayed her inner tension. "I have a purpose. My mother is ill, and the pack, it needs to know what's coming." Cade's brow furrowed. "You're stepping back into a battlefield," he said, voice low. "The pack isn't what it used to be. Loyalties have shifted, shadows have grown within and without these walls. You're walking straight into danger." She drew a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs, steadying her racing heart. "Danger isn't new to me. I've survived worse, and I won't run from it this time." Cade studied her, his gaze sharp, searching, as if weighing the distance between what she said and what she truly felt. "I can't protect you if you make every step alone," he said finally, a hint of vulnerability threading through his usual authority. "I don't need protection," she replied, the words both defiant and honest. "I need allies. If you're willing to stand with me, fine. If not," she let the sentence hang, the implied threat unspoken but clear. The wind shifted, carrying with it scents that didn't belong to the forest. Metallic tang, decay, the faint musk of wolves not bound by loyalty. Cade's ears twitched, his body moved instinctively. alpha instincts responding before his mind fully processed the threat. "They're close," he murmured. "I can feel them moving against the wind. Not pack wolves, something else, something darker." Isla's pulse quickened, the tension coiling like a spring within her. "Show me." She followed his gaze into the shadows, letting her heightened senses scan the forest. Every rustle, every subtle movement, every change in the wind carried potential danger. And then from the underbrush a pair of glowing eyes emerged. Predators not of this pack, strangers who bore the scent of blood and chaos. Their growls rolled through the night, low and deliberate, warning signals that reverberated through Isla's spine. Cade stepped closer, protective yet respectful of her space. "They won't leave without a fight," he said, his tone steady but heavy with unspoken concern. "We face them together." Isla's grip tightened on her dagger, but her eyes softened as they met Cade's. The bond between them pulsed faintly, a subtle reminder that despite years of betrayal, despite the walls built between them, some ties could not be undone. Some connections demanded confrontation of the past, the present, and the shadows lurking just beyond the light. Together they moved into the forest, the moonlight guiding them, shadows stretching and twisting around them. Danger had arrived, and with it, the unspoken truth: Isla's return was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The first confrontation. The forest around Isla and Cade seemed to close in, the trees towering like silent sentinels watching their every movement. Moonlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, leaving patches of darkness that could hide predators, or worse, traitors. Isla's senses were on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, set her pulse racing. "Stay close," Cade whispered, his voice a low rumble that seemed to blend with the shadows. His hand hovered near the hilt of his blade, but never quite touched it, a silent signal that he trusted her to act. Isla nodded, heart hammering, yet she felt a strange sense of control. For the first time in years she was not entirely a victim of circumstance. Then they saw them, three figures emerging from the darkness, their forms humanoid, but movements predatory, unnatural. Their eyes glowed faintly in the silver light, and the smell of decay clung to them like a second skin. "Rogues," Cade muttered, a warning sharpened by experience. "They've been moving along the edges of the territory for weeks, but I didn't expect them here. Now." Isla's grip tightened on her dagger, her knuckles white. Every instinct screamed to fight, yet part of her mind calculated escape routes, hiding spots, and potential reinforcements. She felt the bond with Cade pulsate again, a subtle tug that reminded her of the fragile, complicated tether between them. The first rogue lunged, swift and silent, claws extended. Isla sidestepped instinctively, feeling the brush of its fur against her arm. Her body moved before her mind caught up, wolf instincts sharpening, muscles coiling. Cade intercepted another, his strength and precision lethal. The clash of claws, the hiss of confrontation, the rustle of leaves underfoot, all blended into a symphony of survival. "You're holding back," Cade shouted over the noise, his eyes flashing with concern and frustration. "Use your senses, trust them." Isla's chest heaved. "I'm not holding back," she snapped, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The rogues circled, testing, probing for weakness, and she could feel the tremor of fear radiating from them. Fear of something greater than brute strength. Then it came, a shadow moving faster than the others, its eyes locked on Isla. A sense of familiarity stirred uneasily in her chest. This rogue wasn't just another predator. It was cunning, intelligent, and deadly. Cade noticed it too, stepping protectively between her and the figure. "Stay behind me," he said firmly, yet his eyes betrayed something deeper, doubt, worry, and a faint, unspoken plea for her to trust him. The rogue's growl rumbled through the air, low and warning, yet there was a hesitation, as if it too recognized the bond between Isla and Cade. Isla felt a flicker of clarity, understanding that brute force alone would not win this confrontation. The dance of predator and prey required strategy, timing, and trust. She whispered under her breath, "We're stronger together." And the bond with Cade pulsed again, answering her. They moved as one, synchronizing instincts and actions, turning the chaos into controlled precision. The rogue lunged again, But this time Cade was ready. He caught it midair, using its momentum to hurl it into a tree with a sickening crack. Isla struck another, her dagger finding a gap in its defenses, the creature yelping in pain before retreating into the shadows. For a moment silence fell. The forest seemed to exhale with them, the immediate danger subsiding but not disappearing. Isla's hand shook, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Cade placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You did well," he said softly, but his gaze lingered on her, unguarded, searching. "We both did. But this is only the beginning. They'll come back stronger, smarter." Isla nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. The forest was quiet now, but the shadows held secrets, threats, and tests she hadn't yet faced. And somewhere deep in her chest, the bond with Cade throbbed, not just as a tether to survival, but as a reminder that whatever came next, they were in this together. The rogues had revealed themselves, but so had something else, a glimmer of resilience, strategy, and the unspoken truth that Isla was no longer the girl who had been rejected. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the world, shadowed and dangerous as it was, would soon have to recognize it. Chapter 5, Shadows Within the Pack. The dawn broke over the Pembroke territory in a muted gray, mist curling around the treetops like ghostly fingers. Isla moved silently along the ridge, the forest floor damp beneath her boots, her senses still keyed to the tension of the previous night. The rogues had retreated, but their presence lingered, a shadow that seeped into every corner of the pack's lands. She could feel it, a subtle tremor in the air, the way the birds fell silent, the leaves whispering of danger. Cade walked beside her, his movements calm but controlled, eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. The bond between them pulsed with quiet insistence, a rhythm that demanded attention, demanded trust. Isla tried to suppress the nervous flutter in her chest, reminding herself she had survived the first confrontation. But survival alone was no longer enough. "Something's off," Cade muttered, his gaze narrowing toward the heart of the pack's village. "It's not the rogues. Not entirely. Someone's inside." Isla's stomach twisted. "Inside? You mean someone in the pack?" Cade nodded, lips pressing into a thin line. "Yes, and they're smart, waiting for the right moment." The words sent a chill through her, colder than the morning mist. Betrayal within the pack had a sharper edge than any rogue's claw. It was personal, insidious. Isla's mind raced, piecing together subtle signs she had dismissed. The guarded glances of the elders, the whispers that stopped when she entered a room, the sense of being watched even in the daylight. They entered the main hall, the stone walls echoing with hollow authority. Members of the pack passed by, nodding politely, but Isla felt the weight of their scrutiny, the veiled judgment. Her chest tightened, the familiar ache of rejection mingling with determination. She would not be the victim again, not here, not now. Cade stopped near the center of the hall, turning to her with a grave expression. "We need to find the source before they make a move, and we need to be careful. One mistake, and it won't just be us at risk." Isla swallowed the bond with Cade thrumming in agreement. She nodded, letting her instincts take the lead. Together they moved through the hallways, listening, watching, feeling the pulse of the pack like a living heartbeat beneath their feet. A faint click echoed in the distance, too precise, deliberate to be natural. Cade's hand went to her arm, guiding her to the shadows. Isla crouched low, eyes narrowing as a figure emerged from the darkness. One of the council members, face pale, movements too calculated, a dagger glinting in the dim light. "Caught you," Cade whispered, tension sharpening his tone. Isla felt the surge of adrenaline, the rush of power through her veins, the bond tightening with its insistence to protect and act. The council member froze, eyes wide in shock before recognition flickered, and a cruel smile spread. "Ah, so the Alpha's little shadow hunts with him now," the voice hissed, dripping with malice. "But you're too late. Everything is already in motion." Isla's heart thudded, chest tight, as she stepped forward. "Not if we stop it." Her voice was steady, but inside a storm of fear, determination, and instinct roared. She could feel Cade's gaze burning into her back, protective yet urging her to trust her own power. The council member lunged, dagger aimed at Cade, but Isla moved faster, intercepting, her own blade cutting a clean line. The clash rang out in the hall, steel against steel, and she felt the familiar surge of wolf instincts take over, precision, speed, and raw strength channeling through her body. Cade joined her side seamlessly, their movements synchronized, the bond between them a tether of power, trust, and unspoken understanding. Together, they pushed the council member back, forcing him to retreat into the shadows, a promise of revenge lingering in his eyes. As silence returned, Isla's chest heaved. Cade placed a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her, voice low but steady. "This isn't over. Whoever is behind this, they're planning something bigger. We need to be ready. Both of us." Isla met his gaze, the bond pulsing once again, a rhythm of fire and determination. She had survived the rogues, the rejection, the shadows within her pack, and now she understood something vital. Power wasn't given. It was claimed, and she was ready to claim hers. Outside, the mist thickened, curling like serpents around the stone walls of the pack. Somewhere beyond the ridge, eyes watched, waiting, calculating, and Isla, for the first time in years, was not afraid. Chapter 6. Secrets in the Moonlight. Night draped over the Pembroke territory like a velvet curtain, the moon a pale sentinel hanging low in the sky. Isla stood at the edge of the forest, the soft hum of nocturnal life vibrating through her senses. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl sent her nerves on edge, but also sharpened her focus. Tonight was not for wandering aimlessly. Tonight she had to uncover the truth lurking within her pack. Cade stepped up behind her, quiet, alert, every movement calculated. His presence was steady grounding, yet the bond between them pulsed insistently, reminding Isla that danger and desire often walked hand in hand. "I've traced the disruptions," he murmured, voice low, almost lost to the whispering wind. "There's a pattern. Every attack, every rogue incursion, it leads to one place." Isla's pulse quickened. "Where?" "The elders' quarters," Cade said, his jaw tight. "Someone inside the council is feeding information to the rogues, and it's recent. This isn't a ghost from the past. It's happening now." The words sent a chill down her spine. Betrayal had teeth, and they were sharper when it came from those meant to protect. Isla inhaled deeply, letting the night air fill her lungs, steadying her mind. Fear could be a weapon or a weakness. She chose weapon. They moved silently through the shadowed corridors, the walls of the pack hall cold and unforgiving. Isla's footsteps barely made a sound on the stone floor, every sense alert to the faintest shift in the air. The bond pulsed again, urgent, insisting she stay close, stay vigilant. A flicker of movement caught her eye, one of the council doors slightly ajar, a soft flicker of candlelight spilling into the hallway. Isla signaled to Cade, and together they approached, the tension between them taut. Electric inside, two figures huddled over a stack of parchments. Isla recognized the markings, strategic locations of pack patrols, supply routes, and patrol rotations. Whoever these traitors were, they were meticulous, precise, and dangerously clever. "Cade," Isla whispered, voice tight with barely contained anger. "They're planning something big." Cade's eyes narrowed. "We need proof, and we need to catch them in the act. No mistakes." Isla's eyes swept the room, noting every detail. The angle of the candlelight, the placement of the papers, the subtle tremor in one figure's hand. Her wolf instincts flared, senses heightened. She could smell the tension, the deceit, the adrenaline. Suddenly, a creak echoed from the corridor. Cade froze, hand on his dagger. Isla's muscles coiled, ready to strike. From the shadows, a third figure emerged, their face masked in the moonlight. But the posture, the subtle movements told her everything. This wasn't just a traitor. This was someone who knew the pack intimately, someone who could move without notice. The figure stepped into the candlelight, revealing a familiar face. Isla's heart clenched, a mix of shock, disbelief, and anger. "You?" She breathed, barely managing to keep her voice steady. The council member's lips curled into a smug, almost triumphant smile. "Did you really think you could uncover the truth without being seen?" Cade stepped forward, voice low and controlled, but laced with warning. Step away from the papers. Now the council member's gaze flicked between them, calculating, then shifted to Isla. Ah, the prodigal Luna finally returns. But you're too late. Everything has already begun. A tension, heavy and suffocating, filled the room. Isla felt the bond thrum violently, a wave of instinct, anger, and determination pulsing through her. Every fiber of her being screamed that action was needed. Now, as if on cue, a sudden crash outside signaled the next stage of the assault. The traitor had orchestrated a distraction, drawing attention elsewhere, confident their deeds would remain hidden. Isla and Cade exchanged a glance, the unspoken agreement passing between them. This fight was far from over. The shadows of betrayal stretched long, weaving through the pack, and it was up to them to untangle the threads before the entire territory fell into chaos. Stepping forward, Isla felt the first true surge of power in months. Not just physical, but a quiet, commanding presence that radiated from her very core. Tonight she realized survival was no longer enough. She had to fight, to claim, to protect, and she would, no matter the cost. The moonlight spilled across the room, illuminating the council members' smirk and the scattered parchments, a tableau of looming conflict, secrets, and the promise of reckoning. Chapter 7. The Wolves' Silent Pact. The corridors of the Pembroke stronghold were eerily quiet after the confrontation, but Isla knew the calm was only temporary. Every shadow seemed to slither with potential threat, every gust of wind rattling the stone doors like a warning. She and Cade moved cautiously, their footsteps synchronized, a silent rhythm honed by necessity and trust. "Do you think they suspect we saw them?" Isla whispered, her voice barely audible, blending with the distant howl of a lone wolf outside. Cade's gaze swept the corridor, sharp and measured. "They might, but they won't act until they think they're safe. That's when we strike." Isla's wolf stirred, instincts prickling with the tension. Her pulse raced, not just from fear but from anticipation. Every fiber of her body hummed with the urgency of the pack's precarious future. She had learned long ago that hesitation could mean death. Now it could mean the loss of everything she fought to protect. As they reached the council chamber, Isla slowed, her eyes tracing the intricate carvings along the doors, symbols of the pack's ancient history. It was ironic, she thought, that those who swore to uphold the pack's honor now threatened it from within. She took a steadying breath. Tonight she wouldn't just uncover treachery, she would demand accountability. Inside the chamber, the air was thick with the scent of old wood, parchment, and something else, tension, bitter and metallic, curling around the room like smoke. The council members had gathered in a circle, faces lit by the flickering candlelight, their murmurs barely masking the unease. Cade's hand brushed against Isla's, a brief touch that conveyed solidarity and unspoken reassurance. Isla nodded subtly, letting the bond between them strengthen, anchoring her resolve. They were not alone. From the shadows, a low growl rumbled in her chest, not a wolf outside, but the primal roar of her own determination. She stepped forward, letting her presence fill the room, commanding attention without uttering a word. The council's whispers faltered. Eyes turned toward her, some curious, some wary. Enough. Isla's voice cut through the chamber, calm yet firm, carrying the weight of authority she hadn't known she possessed. The pack cannot survive if we allow betrayal to fester. Secrets have been uncovered, and now it is time for action. A tense silence followed, punctuated by the soft crackle of candle flames. Every eye was on her, measuring, calculating, waiting for a crack in her composure. Cade remained at her side, unwavering, a silent sentinel in the storm of scrutiny. From across the circle, one council member shifted uneasily. "You presume too much, Luna," they said, voice quivering with either fear or defiance. Isla couldn't yet tell which. "I presume nothing," Isla replied, stepping closer. "I respond to what is real. Our pack's future is at stake. The rogues are mobilizing, the traitor has been identified, and yet some of you sit idle. We need a plan, a pact to protect every wolf under this roof. A silent pact, sworn not with words but with action. The chamber buzzed with murmurs, some skeptical, some grudgingly respectful. Isla could sense the shift in energy, their hesitation, their fear, and perhaps, finally, their willingness to act. Cade inclined his head toward her. "We can't afford hesitation. If we do nothing, everything collapses. Tonight, we unite, or we die divided." Isla's heart hammered not with fear but with the fire of conviction. She extended her hand toward the center of the circle, and one by one the council members hesitated, then mirrored the gesture. Even the one who had smirked moments ago now placed a trembling hand atop hers. A silent pact had been forged, not spoken aloud, but etched into the very air of the chamber. Shadows danced across the walls as the candlelight flickered, hinting at the trials to come. Isla felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, heavy but not crushing. She was no longer just the rejected Luna returning to her pack. She was the heartbeat of its survival, the spark that could ignite courage where fear had taken root. Outside, the wind swept through the forest, carrying with it the distant howls of wolves rallying to unseen commands. The night had not ended, in fact, it had just begun, and somewhere beyond the borders of the pack, danger moved with purpose, waiting for a single misstep to strike. Isla inhaled deeply, the scent of pine, earth, and impending storm filling her senses. The bond with Cade pulsed insistently, reminding her that allies and enemies often wore the same face. But she was ready, prepared, and tonight she would not falter. Chapter 8. Echoes of Betrayal. The first rays of dawn barely filtered through the dense canopy of the forest surrounding the Pembroke stronghold, yet Isla was already awake, crouched atop a ridge overlooking the valley. Her wolf prowled beside her, senses sharpened, alert to every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig that could betray movement below. The wind carried a mixture of pine, damp soil, and something far more sinister. A scent she couldn't yet name but knew instinctively spelled danger. Cade emerged silently from the shadows, boots whispering against the undergrowth. He moved with the grace of a predator, but there was an urgency in his eyes that mirrored the tension pressing against Isla's chest. "They're not idle," he murmured, barely audible, his gaze sweeping across the valley where the pack's loyal sentinels were stationed. "Something's coming. I can feel it, and it isn't the rogues this time, it's someone from within." Isla's pulse tightened. She had hoped that the council's silent pact would be enough to ward off treachery, but the warning from Cade reinforced her deepest fear. Betrayal didn't announce itself. It hid, lurking in familiar faces in whispered counsel, in decisions that seemed prudent yet carried poison beneath. "I thought we had eyes everywhere," she said, her voice low, carrying more frustration than fear. "How could someone slip past the patrols without leaving a trace?" Cade's jaw tightened. "They're clever, experienced, and desperate. That combination is dangerous. We need to anticipate their moves before they strike, or we risk losing more than just territory. We risk losing each other." The ridge offered a panoramic view of the Pembroke lands, rolling hills and dark forests stretching to the horizon. Isla's eyes traced the familiar landmarks, the training grounds where she had once sparred as a fledgling warrior, the cliff edge where the pack held rituals under the full moon, the central courtyard that had become the stage for her humiliation years ago. Each memory carried a weight, each shadow a reminder of her past vulnerabilities and present responsibilities. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a figure darting between the trees, silent, deliberate. Her wolf growled low in her throat, muscles coiling with anticipation. Cade's hand found hers, fingers brushing against her knuckles, grounding her. "They've begun," he whispered, "and they know we're awake." Isla's heart raced not from fear, but from the fierce clarity that settled over her like armor. She had trained for this, not just to survive, but to protect those who couldn't fight. Every instinct screamed to act, every thought honed to strategy. The first attack came in a flurry of shadows, masked figures moving with unnatural coordination, attempting to breach the perimeter from the eastern forest. The sentinels were caught off guard, their alarms silenced before they could call for backup. Isla and Cade moved instantly, weaving through the trees with a predator's precision, intercepting the intruders before they could reach the pack's heart. The confrontation was chaotic, a blur of limbs, teeth, and claws. Isla's wolf lunged alongside her, a blur of fur and fangs, striking with calculated force. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, heightening her senses, sharpening her reflexes. Every strike, every dodge, was a dance of survival and strategy. Through the chaos, Isla caught sight of a figure retreating, some unfamiliar, someone whose betrayal cut deeper than any fang or claw. Her blood ran cold as recognition hit. This wasn't just a rogue attack, this was a message. Someone inside wanted her tested, humiliated, weakened. Cade's hand gripped her shoulder, grounding her as she narrowed her eyes on the retreating figure. "They're leaving for now," he said, voice tight with barely restrained fury. "But they'll return, and next time it won't be just a message." Isla's wolf whimpered low in her throat, a mirror of the tension that coiled in her chest. The dawn had broken, but the darkness lingered, not in the forest, but in the hearts of those who had once sworn loyalty. She understood now that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about trust, deception, and the courage to confront both. Her gaze met Cade's, and for the first time, Isla felt a fragile sense of hope. Together they could face the storm, but only if they remained vigilant. Every shadow held a threat, every whisper carried a secret, and every heartbeat was a reminder. Betrayal was never far, and the price of failure was unimaginable. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting, watching, and Isla, for the first time in years, welcomed the challenge. Chapter 9. Web of Lies. The evening fog settled over the Pembroke lands like a suffocating veil, muting the colors of the forest and cloaking the familiar paths in uncertainty. Isla moved cautiously, every footstep deliberate, the undergrowth crunching softly beneath her boots. Her wolf padded silently at her side, muscles coiled, senses alert to the faintest hint of movement. The attack earlier had rattled the pack's confidence, and whispers of suspicion already seeped through the corridors of the stronghold like a disease. Cade followed closely, his presence both reassuring and electrifying. Isla could feel the tension radiating from him, a mirrored reflection of her own unease. "We need to know who's behind this," he murmured, voice low, almost drowned by the distant howls of the night. "And we need to act before the pack begins to fracture from within." Isla's gaze swept across the shadowed tree line, picking out the slightest distortions. Broken twigs, footprints not of the pack, a scent carried faintly on the wind. Every detail mattered, every observation a potential key to uncovering the hidden enemy. She realized that the attack had been more than a simple raid. It was strategic, precise, and personal. Someone wanted to destabilize them, to sow doubt, fear, and chaos. "Someone is playing a dangerous game," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions rising within her. "And they're using us as pieces on their board." Cade nodded, eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. "We need information now." Their path led them to the outskirts of the eastern woods, where the remnants of the attackers' camp had been hastily abandoned. Isla knelt beside a scorched patch of earth, her fingers brushing against fragments of fabric snagged on thorns, traces of blood long dried, but still potent with the scent of violence. Every piece told a story, every mark a clue. She could feel the threads of deceit weaving a tangled web around the pack, and she knew that unraveling it required more than brute strength. It required insight, cunning, and courage. "Look here," Isla whispered, pointing to a footprint partially obscured by mud. "This isn't from the rogues we've trained for. The gait, it's calculated, almost deliberate. Someone wants us to see this, to panic." Cade crouched beside her, tracing the outline with a finger. "And yet they left a trail, a mistake, or a trap." The forest around them seemed to tighten, the shadows stretching and bending as if listening. Every rustle, every distant snap of a branch sent Isla's senses into overdrive. She felt the familiar pull of her wolf, urging her to hunt, to strike, to protect. But her human mind reminded her of patience, strategy, and the thin line between impulsive action and calculated response. As they moved deeper, the undergrowth gave way to a clearing bathed in moonlight. The silver glow highlighted the skeletal remains of a small campfire, its ashes blackened and cold. But what caught Isla's attention was a series of symbols etched into the surrounding trees. Runic markings she recognized from the pack's ancient texts. They weren't just warnings, they were messages precise and coded. Someone within the pack had knowledge, intent, and a motive that reached beyond simple power struggles. Cade's hand rested on the hilt of his dagger, eyes flicking to the shadows that danced along the edge of the clearing. "This is personal," he said quietly. "They want fear, doubt, control, and they know exactly how to get it." Isla's heartbeat quickened, a mix of anticipation and trepidation coiling in her chest. Her mind raced through possibilities, who could betray them, and why. Each suspect carried a history, a potential grudge, a hidden agenda, and yet the truth seemed just beyond reach, veiled in shadows and half-truths. Her wolf growled low, sensing movement that Isla could not yet see. A figure emerged, cloaked and silent, stepping from the darkness with predatory grace. Isla tensed, every muscle ready to react, but the figure halted, raising hands in mock surrender. "Looking for answers?" The voice was smooth, deceptively calm, laced with amusement. "Or are you simply trying to survive the web you're already caught in?" Isla's jaw tightened, fingers brushing against the hilt of her blade. The figure's eyes glinted in the moonlight, familiar and dangerous all at once. Recognition sparked a cold fire through her veins. The game had begun, and she realized that the lines between friend and foe were thinner than she had ever imagined. Cade's presence at her side reminded her. She wasn't alone. Together they could navigate the deception. But every step forward carried risk. Every truth uncovered had a price. And the night was far from over. Chapter 10, Secrets Among Wolves. The first rays of dawn pierced through the dense canopy of the Pembroke forest, scattering the lingering fog into ribbons of silver light. Isla moved cautiously along the familiar trail, her senses still taut from the previous night's encounter. The figure's cryptic words echoed in her mind, mingling with the rhythmic pounding of her pulse. Someone close to the pack was orchestrating chaos, and Isla could no longer trust her instincts alone. Cade walked a step behind, silent but ever watchful. The early morning chill clung to his coat, yet his presence radiated warmth, grounding her in the storm of uncertainty. "They're getting bolder," he murmured, breaking the silence. "Leaving traces like that, it's almost a challenge." Isla's eyes scanned the forest floor, noting every uneven stone, broken twig, and disturbed patch of earth. Each anomaly whispered of hidden movements, covert rendezvous, and secrets that had long festered beneath the surface of the pack's unity. Her wolf growled low, a primal warning that danger was still close, invisible yet palpably near. "Caution," Isla said, her voice barely above a whisper, though each word carried the weight of command. "This is their territory as much as ours. Someone wants us off balance, and I can feel it." The trail led them to a secluded glade where sunlight filtered through the branches in fractured patterns, painting the mossy ground with fleeting gold. Here the air was heavy, carrying scents of both life and decay. Isla knelt, pressing her fingers to the soft earth, detecting a faint disturbance, footprints, partial and overlapping, evidence of careful movement, deliberate concealment. "They knew we would follow," Cade said grimly, crouching beside her. His hand hovered near the hilt of his dagger, but his eyes were fixed on the same subtle impressions Isla had discovered. "They're marking their territory without leaving themselves exposed. Professional, experienced." Isla's mind raced. Whoever was behind the attacks and the messages in the woods had knowledge of pack strategies, hunting patterns, and even the weaknesses of those who guarded it. The realization made her stomach tighten. It wasn't just a rogue on the outskirts. It was someone embedded within their world, moving among them like a shadow in daylight. Suddenly, a rustle broke the delicate tension, and Isla's wolf bristled. Cade shifted, alert, every muscle coiled for action. From behind a fallen oak, a pair of eyes glinted in the filtered sunlight. The figure stepped forward slowly, hands raised, but Isla noticed the subtle sway of a weapon concealed beneath the cloak. "You shouldn't be here," Isla said, her voice low but unwavering. "We're watching, always watching." The cloaked figure laughed, a sound that carried both amusement and menace. "And yet here I am," they said, stepping into the patch of sunlight, revealing just enough to send a shiver down Isla's spine. The markings on their armor, the glint in their eyes. It was someone she had never expected to see in this part of the forest. Cade placed a firm hand on her shoulder, a silent anchor. "Trust no one," he murmured. "Not yet." Isla nodded, feeling the familiar tension coiling in her chest. Every step she took now was laden with strategy and restraint, every breath measured, every heartbeat a countdown. The forest seemed to close around them, shifting with the rhythm of hidden threats, of secrets too long buried. The figure tilted their head, studying Isla, as if weighing the contents of her soul. "The pack isn't what it seems," they said, voice laced with implication, "and neither are you, Isla Higgins. There's more at stake here than loyalty or revenge. Everything you think you know about who you are is about to change." Isla's eyes narrowed. Her mind whirred through possibilities, questions, and doubts. How much of the pack's history had been hidden from her? How many lies had been wrapped in loyalty, and who had been manipulating her every move? Cade shifted closer, whispering into her ear, "Whatever happens, we face it together." The figure's gaze flicked between them, sharp and calculating. "Very well," they said, "but remember, every secret has its price. And every choice you make will echo far beyond these woods." As the cloaked figure disappeared back into the forest, Isla felt the tension of anticipation tighten around her like a vice. The morning sun, once a symbol of clarity, now seemed to illuminate a path riddled with shadows. Secrets, betrayals, and unspoken truth stretched before her, and every decision she made from this point onward would ripple through the pack, reshaping alliances and testing loyalties. Isla drew in a steadying breath. Her wolf growled low, matching her resolve. No matter what lay ahead, she would face it. And she would not let the pack or herself fall prey to the hidden enemy lurking in plain sight. Chapter 11. The Alpha's Hidden Agenda. The Pembroke Pack Council chamber smelled of polished wood and burning candles, the air thick with tension. Isla stood near the back, arms crossed, but every muscle in her body hummed with alertness. The flicker of torchlight played across the faces of the pack elders, revealing their hidden judgments and subtle calculations. Cade lingered beside her, silent, his presence a steadying force, though the weight of unspoken truths pressed down like a storm about to break. Alpha Miller, seated at the head of the long table, exuded authority and restraint. His dark eyes scanned the room, but they lingered on Isla longer than any formal duty would demand. A storm brewed beneath that composed exterior, a mixture of duty, suspicion, and unspoken regrets. "Isla Higgins," he began, voice even deliberate. "You've returned, but not without drawing attention. The pack is on edge. Rogue movements have increased, and there are questions about loyalty within our ranks. You have seen things that others haven't. Speak now." Isla's throat tightened. Every word she spoke would carry weight, every movement scrutinized. Her mind replayed the events of the forest, the cryptic figure, the subtle signs that the pack had been compromised from within, yet revealing too much would put Cade and herself at risk. "We found evidence," she said carefully, "that someone with intimate knowledge of the pack has been coordinating the rogue attacks. Footprints, supply disruptions, messages in the forest. It's deliberate, calculated." A murmur rippled through the elders, but Alpha Miller's gaze never wavered. He leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled. "And what do you propose?" "That we suspect our own kin, that we assume treachery in our midst." Isla's wolf growled softly beneath her ribs, a warning that resonated with the unease she had felt for weeks. "I propose vigilance. We cannot ignore the signs. I don't trust appearances, not anymore." Cade's hand brushed against hers, a small grounding reminder that she wasn't alone. The council's scrutiny was suffocating, but within it Isla found determination. Her voice steadied. "We need a plan, surveillance guards." And she hesitated, choosing her words like a blade sheathed in silk. "We need to understand the Alpha's intentions fully. There are decisions being made without transparency, and the pack deserves clarity." Alpha Miller's lips pressed into a thin line, but there was a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. A shadow of his own regrets, perhaps, or the careful weighing of consequences. "Transparency comes at a cost," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, Isla Cade, you will lead the reconnaissance, discreetly. Report only to me. If our enemy believes us divided, they will underestimate us, and that is when we strike. The gravity of the mission settled heavily on Isla's shoulders. Every instinct screamed danger, but the fire in her chest, the same fire that had fueled her training, her survival, and her return, blazed stronger. She nodded, the weight of responsibility and trust intertwining. We will uncover the truth, she said, eyes meeting Alpha Miller's, and protect the pack no matter the cost. As the council disbanded, Isla and Cade stepped into the forested corridors that led to the training grounds. The morning sun had fully risen, yet shadows lingered among the towering trees. Every rustle, every flicker of movement seemed amplified, every sound carried a warning. Cade's voice broke the tension. This is no ordinary rogue threat, he said, glancing at Isla. Someone is manipulating from within. We have to anticipate not just attacks, but intentions. Strategy will be our weapon. Isla's wolf growled softly, a primal echo of determination and warning. She could feel the pack's heartbeat, the rhythm of territory and loyalty pulsing through the land. Every shadow was a question. Every silence a potential betrayal. And yet, beneath it all, Isla's mind sharpened, calculating, preparing. The hidden enemy was patient, so was she. Tonight the game of shadows would begin. Chapter 12. Shadows in the pack. The forest around Pembroke Pack headquarters had grown eerily silent by nightfall, the usual chorus of nocturnal wildlife replaced by a tension that seemed to crawl along the ground like mist. Isla moved with calculated steps, Cade's presence a protective shadow beside her. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set her nerves alight, reminding her that the unseen enemy had eyes everywhere. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting elongated shadows that twisted and swayed with the wind. Isla's senses sharpened. Every sound, every scent was magnified in her wolf, enhanced perception. She could feel the vibrations of the forest floor, the heartbeat of the land beneath her feet, and with it the subtle shift of danger moving closer. Cade broke the silence. We've identified gaps in the patrol routes. Whoever's behind this knows the terrain intimately. They want us distracted, reacting instead of anticipating. Isla's mind raced. That's only possible if someone from inside the pack is feeding them information. Her voice was a whisper, though her wolf made it sound like a growl echoing through the shadows. We need to find out who before more damage is done. Trust is a luxury we don't have. They reached the edge of a clearing where the moonlight illuminated a series of faint footprints, partially obscured by fallen leaves. Isla crouched, her eyes scanning the subtle impressions left behind. Each print told a story: hurried steps, hesitation, retreat. Someone had been here recently and had been careful not to be noticed. Cade leaned down, examining the tracks. These aren't rogue prints, he said quietly. They're made by someone who knows exactly what they're doing. This isn't random. It's orchestrated. Isla's pulse quickened. She traced the prints with her eyes, memorizing every contour, every depth, every subtle indication of weight and speed. Her wolf thrummed with anticipation and unease. The sense of being hunted was almost palpable. Suddenly, a rustle from the underbrush made both of them freeze. Isla's ears twitched, her body tensing as she instinctively crouched lower. Cade's hand brushed against hers, a silent warning and reassurance at once. From the shadows a figure emerged, a lone she-wolf, unfamiliar, and moving with practiced stealth. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, but there was hesitation in her posture. Isla's instincts screamed caution. "Who are you?" Isla demanded, her voice steady, though her muscles were coiled like a predator ready to strike. The stranger lifted her hand slightly, showing she meant no immediate harm. "I'm someone who wants to help," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "There's a faction within the pack. Alpha Miller's council isn't as united as it seems. I can guide you to the truth, but we must move quickly before more are hurt." Isla exchanged a glance with Cade. The forest seemed to lean in, holding its breath, waiting for her decision. Every instinct screamed wariness, yet something in the stranger's eyes, a flicker of desperation and honesty, resonated with her. "Then we move," Isla said finally, voice low and resolute. "But know this, if you betray us, there will be no mercy." The stranger nodded, and together the three of them slipped deeper into the forest, shadows entwining with shadows, every step a dance between trust and suspicion. As they vanished into the night, Isla couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closer than ever, lurking not just in the darkness outside, but within the very walls of the pack she had returned to protect. And for the first time since her return, Isla felt the full weight of the hidden war she had stepped into. A war where alliances were fragile, truths were buried, and every move could decide the survival of the pack and of her own heart. Chapter 13. Echoes of Betrayal. The moon had climbed higher, casting a silver glow that seeped through the cracks of the old Pembroke pack hall. Inside, shadows stretched long across the stone floors, twisting around pillars and staircases, creating a labyrinth of light and dark that seemed to mirror the turmoil within Isla's mind. She moved quietly along the corridor, Cade's presence beside her a steady anchor against the rising tide of unease. Every footstep echoed faintly, but to Isla's sharpened senses it felt like the walls themselves were listening, waiting for a misstep, a sign of weakness. "Someone has been here," Cade murmured, crouching near a door that bore faint claw marks. Recently, and not just wandering, they were searching for something. Isla knelt, tracing the scratches with a gloved finger. Her pulse quickened. Whoever had been here knew the inner workings of the hall. They knew where secrets were kept, which doors led to private chambers, which hallways were empty. This was no random intruder. This was someone who understood the pulse of the pack. Her thoughts flickered to Alpha Miller. Could it be him, or someone close to him? The doubt gnawed at her, a persistent echo that made her wolf restless. Trust had always been a fragile thing, and now it felt like glass beneath her fingertips, ready to shatter at any wrong move. A sudden whisper reached her ears, soft and deliberate, carried on the draft of the night. "Isla." She froze. The voice was familiar, yet warped with tension. Her body tensed, senses flaring as she scanned the corridor. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in black, their eyes gleaming with recognition and something darker, fear, guilt, and urgency all rolled into one. "It's me," the figure said, stepping closer. The dim light revealed a young she-wolf, her fur bristling slightly, her expression tight with anxiety. "I couldn't go to anyone else. I didn't know who to trust. But they're planning something that could destroy the pack from within." Isla's mind raced. Every instinct screamed caution. Betrayal had already left its mark on her, and she knew better than to accept words at face value. Yet there was a sincerity, a tremor in the she-wolf's stance that seemed genuine, almost desperate. "Explain," Isla said, her voice low but commanding, carrying the weight of authority she had clawed back from years of exile and heartbreak. "They've been manipulating the council, feeding false reports, pushing members to take sides," the she-wolf whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Alpha Miller, he doesn't know everything, but the deeper this goes, the less control anyone will have. By the next full moon, chaos will erupt, packs divided, loyalties broken, and some of us won't survive." Cade's growl rumbled softly beside Isla. His wolf's unease mirrored her own. "We need proof," he said. "We can't act on words alone, or we risk becoming pawns in their game." The stranger nodded, glancing at the shadows around them. "I have what you need, but getting it won't be simple. They're watching, listening. One wrong step, and it's over, not just for me, for all of us." Isla's mind sharpened, every nerve alert. The weight of the responsibility pressed against her chest, a mixture of dread and determination. She had survived rejection, betrayal, and exile. She had returned not just to reclaim her place, but to protect the pack she had grown to love, and perhaps, secretly, herself as well. "Then we move," she said, voice steady, though her heart thudded in wild anticipation. "We get what we need, and we take the fight to them, but we do it smart, quiet, calculated." No mistakes. As they melted back into the shadows of the hall, Isla could feel the echoes of betrayal lingering like a poisonous fog. Every step forward was a gamble, every whispered conversation a potential trap. The night stretched on, heavy with tension, the forest outside holding its breath along with her. And somewhere in the distance she could sense it, the first ripple of the storm about to break, the prelude to a conflict that would test loyalty, courage, and the fragile bonds of trust she had spent a lifetime rebuilding. Chapter 14. The Alpha's Hidden Truth. Dawn broke slowly over the Pembroke Pack territory, the horizon painted in muted shades of rose and gold. Isla perched atop a jagged cliff, overlooking the dense forest, the wind tugging at her hair and tugging at the tension wound tight in her shoulders. Cade was beside her, his presence a quiet shield against the gnawing uncertainty that had plagued her since the night of the stranger's warning. "The council is in chaos," Cade murmured, eyes scanning the trees below, alert to any movement. "If we act too soon, we risk exposing ourselves and them. But if we wait too long, the pack could fracture completely." Isla's gaze narrowed, tracing the outline of the distant pack hall, where Alpha Miller now moved like a shadow among shadows, a figure carved from steel and sorrow. There was something in him she hadn't yet seen, something hidden behind his hardened exterior, a truth that could either save them or destroy everything. Her mind wandered back to the last confrontation, the sharp sting of rejection, still lingering like a scar. The image of Miller turning away, dismissing her with a smirk, was seared into her memory. And yet she had caught the flicker, the hesitation in his amber eyes, a hint that beneath the Alpha's mask of control was something fragile, something human. "Isla," Cade said gently, breaking her reverie, "you can't do this alone. He's dangerous, but not beyond understanding. If anyone can find the truth behind this chaos, it's you. And him." The words unsettled her. She had trained herself to survive without relying on anyone, to trust only the sharp edge of her instincts. Yet Cade's quiet confidence in her stirred something unexpected, a thread of hope tangled with fear. As if summoned by her thoughts, Miller appeared at the edge of the clearing below. His stance was rigid, eyes scanning the tree line, wolf senses probing the mist for threats. But then, unexpectedly, his gaze lifted directly toward Isla, locking with hers. In that moment, everything shifted, authority, fear, resentment, all merged into a tense silence that hummed louder than the wind. Without a word he descended, moving with the fluid precision of a predator and the weight of unspoken truths. When he finally stopped before her, the sun illuminated the sharp lines of his jaw and the faint crease of worry between his brows. "Why are you here?" he demanded, voice low but carrying the power of command. Isla met his gaze evenly. "I'm here because the pack is in danger, and because I need to know. What aren't you telling anyone?" Miller's eyes darkened, and for a fleeting second vulnerability cracked his facade. "There are things the council will never approve of. Secrets buried to protect everyone, even if it means keeping the truth from the pack. You don't understand the weight of leadership." "I understand more than you think," Isla interrupted, the fire in her chest pushing past fear. "I've survived rejection, exile, and lies. I'm not afraid of truth, no matter how dangerous it is." For a long moment Miller studied her, as if weighing the consequences of trust against the risk of exposure. Then slowly he extended a hand, not just a gesture of alliance, but an acknowledgement of her place beside him in this storm. "I didn't want to involve you," he admitted, voice quieter now, tinged with something almost like regret. "But the pack, the people I care about, they're counting on more than just my strength. And you're stronger than you realize." Isla's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed caution, yet the truth in his words resonated deeply. She had been underestimated her entire life, yet here was a man, a leader, recognizing her power both wolf and human, and offering an unspoken truce. "Then tell me everything," she demanded. "No more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to save the pack, we do it together." Miller's lips pressed into a thin line. Slowly he nodded. Then you need to understand the Council's manipulation and the danger that's already inside these walls. Not just outsiders, some of our own have been compromised. Cade's growl rumbled low, but Isla's attention was fixed on Miller. In the stillness of the morning, amidst the rising mist and the distant calls of wolves, she realized something vital. The battle ahead was not just physical, but a test of trust, resilience, and the fragile threads that bound hearts, even hearts broken by betrayal. And as Miller spoke the first words of the hidden truth, Isla knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 15, Shadows of the Past. The forest was heavy with fog, each tree looming like a silent sentinel guarding secrets too old to remember. Isla moved through the underbrush, senses stretched taut, her heartbeat a constant drum in her ears. Cade followed closely, his presence a grounding force against the tension that threatened to unravel her composure. "You feel it too, don't you?" Cade murmured, his voice low, almost swallowed by the mist. "The pack isn't just threatened by outsiders, there's something inside, something hiding." Isla nodded, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. "I've felt it for weeks, the whispers, the disappearances. And now, the Council won't answer questions. They act as if everything is normal." Her jaw tightened, but we both know it isn't. Ahead, the pack hall rose from the fog like a fortress carved from stone and secrets. Miller was already there, pacing with an energy that betrayed the calm mask he wore around others. When he saw Isla, a flicker of something raw passed through his amber eyes, relief, maybe, but also the tension of unspoken truths. "Isla," he said, his voice carrying a gravity that made her pulse quicken, "you need to see this for yourself." He led them through the winding corridors of the hall to a room at the far end, dimly lit by lanterns that cast long, quivering shadows across the walls. On the table lay a map of the territory, marked with symbols and notes in Miller's precise handwriting. "Look here," he instructed, pointing to a series of markings along the eastern borders. "These aren't random attacks. Someone is orchestrating them, testing the pack's defenses, learning our weaknesses, and these signs," he tapped another section of the map, "show knowledge only an insider could have." Isla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning fog. "You mean one of our own?" Miller's jaw clenched. "I don't know who yet, but whoever it is, they're patient, methodical, and ruthless. They've been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." Cade's growl resonated low in the room. "We need to root them out before they cause irreparable damage. But if the traitor suspects we're onto them—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like a knife. Isla's gaze sharpened. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders, yet with it came a spark of determination. "Then we make them reveal themselves carefully, strategically. No more mistakes." Miller's eyes softened just enough for Isla to catch the fleeting vulnerability beneath his alpha exterior. "You realize this puts you at risk," he said quietly, "being this close to the investigation. To me, whoever's behind this won't hesitate to use you as leverage." She met his gaze without flinching. "I've survived rejection, exile, and betrayal. I'm not afraid anymore. And neither should you be, at least not in letting me help." The tension between them crackled like lightning ready to strike. Every word, every glance carried unspoken layers, mistrust, grudging respect, and the first hints of a connection neither of them could deny. Miller exhaled slowly, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. "Very well, you'll join me." But one misstep, he didn't finish the threat. It didn't need words. Isla understood perfectly. As they pored over the maps and reports, analyzing every anomaly, every whisper of strange behavior within the pack, Isla couldn't shake the feeling that the true danger wasn't just the attacks, it was the growing storm between them. Every proximity, every touch, every shared glance teased the bond neither wanted to admit was awakening. And somewhere in the depths of the hall, shadows moved, watching, waiting. The traitor was closer than they knew, and the revelation would come when Isla least expected it, when trust and betrayal collided in a single shattering moment. In the silence of that room, as fog pressed against the windows and wind whispered warnings through the trees, Isla realized this was only the beginning. The past was far from dead, and the secrets of the pack would test her resolve, her heart, and the fragile trust she was building with the Alpha she couldn't quite ignore. Chapter 16. The traitor revealed. The fog clung to the trees like a shroud as Isla and Miller advanced toward the eastern border, the map etched into her mind with every detail. Cade stayed close, muscles taut, ears flicking at every rustle, every snap of a twig. The forest felt alive tonight, each shadow seeming to pulse with secret intent. "Something's not right," Isla whispered, her senses prickling. She could feel it, the subtle shift in the air, the almost imperceptible vibration that didn't belong. "We're being watched." Miller didn't respond immediately. His gaze swept the tree line, amber eyes narrowing, jaw tight. "Stay close. Don't react unless I give the signal." His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it made her heart beat faster. Hours of tracking, analyzing anomalies, and reading the signs had led them here. They were too close for comfort, and Isla could feel the threads of tension winding tighter around her chest. Every snap of a branch, every distant howl, set her nerves on edge. Then a figure stepped from the shadows, unexpected, deliberate. Mora, her lips curved in a slow, confident smile, eyes glinting with something darker than mere malice. Well, if it isn't the prodigal Luna and her Alpha," she purred, voice carrying in the still night. Cade's growl rolled low and dangerous, a warning that sent the blood pounding in Isla's veins. Miller stepped forward, jaw-tight, muscles coiled like a spring. "Step back," he commanded, but Mora didn't flinch. "You've been sniffing around trying to play detective," she said, eyes flicking to Isla, "but you're too blind to see the truth." Isla's pulse raced. Something in Mora's stance, the subtle shift of her weight, the way her fingers flexed. She wasn't just here to intimidate. She was the traitor, the insider, the one who had been orchestrating the attacks from within. "Why?" Isla asked, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Why betray your own pack?" Mora's laugh was soft, cruel, a melody of contempt. "Because power is never given freely, little wolf, and some of us are willing to do whatever it takes to claim it." Her eyes glimmered, calculating. "You, Isla, you've always been in the way." Miller stepped fully between them. "Enough. This ends tonight," he said, voice low but carrying a threat that made the air tighten around them. But Mora was ready. In a blur she shifted, wolf form erupting from human, fur black as midnight, eyes blazing with calculated malice. Cade lunged instinctively, teeth bared, but Mora was faster than they expected, circling them like a predator testing prey. Isla felt a surge of heat in her chest, the bond thrumming between her and Miller stronger than ever, pulling her focus, sharpening her instincts. "Miller now," she shouted. Together they moved as one, instincts honed, hearts synchronized. The first clash was brutal, wolf against wolf, ferocity clashing with strategy, every movement measured, every strike carrying intent. Mora's speed and agility were lethal, but Miller's experience and Isla's rising strength began to turn the tide. As the fight raged, Isla's mind cleared. The fear, the hesitation, the lingering doubts, they melted away under the raw clarity of survival and the bond she shared with Miller. Every growl, every snapping of jaws, every echoing roar of determination pushed them closer, until finally Mora stumbled, caught off guard by their combined precision. Miller pinned her, muscles straining, breath ragged. "It's over," he growled. Mora hissed, eyes wide with fury and disbelief. You think this changes anything?" Her voice trembled, a mix of rage and fear. "It changes everything," Isla said firmly, stepping forward, eyes meeting Mora's with an intensity that rooted her in place. "The pack survives. You do not win." As Mora was restrained and dragged back to the council chambers, Isla felt the adrenaline ebb, leaving a pounding awareness of Miller's nearness, the heat of his body a tether to her own wild pulse. The danger wasn't over. There were still questions, threats lurking in the shadows, but for the first time in weeks, Isla felt the faint stirrings of control, of power, of purpose, and for the first time she realized that she wasn't just surviving this pack, she was shaping it. Miller's gaze softened briefly as he looked at her. "You were incredible," he said quietly. I don't know what I'd do without you." Isla met his gaze, feeling the tension between them thrum with unspoken words. Trust, desire, and something more tangled, yet undeniable, hung between them in the cool night air. And as the first light of dawn brushed the forest canopy, Isla knew one truth: the traitor had been revealed, but the real battle, the one for hearts, bonds, and the future of the pack, was only beginning. Chapter 17. Shadows of Desire. The forest lay silent, draped in the fragile light of early morning, yet the tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Isla moved beside Miller, every step measured, senses still alert despite Moore's capture. The adrenaline of the night's confrontation had ebbed, but its residue lingered in her muscles, in her heartbeat, in the way her skin tingled when he came close. "You shouldn't have gone so far," Miller murmured, voice low, almost a growl, as they walked along the misted path back to the pack's heart. His eyes, amber and sharp, scanned the woods even as they focused on her. "You could have been seriously hurt." Isla swallowed, her throat dry. "And you think I care," she said lightly, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "I couldn't let her get away with it, not after everything." Miller stopped abruptly, turning to face her fully. The intensity in his gaze made her shiver. "It's not just about her," he said, each word deliberate. "It's about you. Every time you throw yourself into danger, every time you test your limits, you're risking more than just yourself. You're putting this pack and me at risk." Isla's chest tightened. The weight of his words wasn't reprimand, but something heavier, more personal, pulling at her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She wanted to respond, to argue, but the sound of his voice, the closeness, the raw heat emanating from him, made the words catch in her throat. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant call of a lone owl and the rustle of leaves. Isla realized with a jolt how acutely aware she was of him, his presence, his scent, the subtle brush of his arm when they moved together. The bond, already a quiet hum in her chest, now thrummed loudly, demanding attention, insisting on a connection she wasn't ready to fully acknowledge. I just want to help," she said finally, softer now, a confession more to herself than to him. "I can't stand feeling powerless." Miller's expression softened, a fleeting vulnerability crossing his face before the mask of authority returned. "Then let me help you," he said. His hand brushed hers almost accidentally, but the contact sent sparks of awareness through her, jolting every nerve alive. "Let me show you that you don't have to carry this alone." Isla's breath hitched, and she looked away, trying to mask the sudden rush of emotion. The forest felt smaller now, the shadows deeper, the quiet hum of nature turning into an almost tangible pressure around them. She could feel every pulse, every heartbeat, every subtle movement in him, and in herself a mirror of desire and uncertainty grew, tangled with fear and caution. They continued their path in near silence, but every step was charged. Miller's protective stance, the taut lines of his body, the faint brush of his fingers against hers as he guided her around a gnarled root, all of it threaded a current of tension she couldn't ignore. Arriving at the training grounds, Isla paused, inhaling deeply. The space was familiar, yet different now, tinged with the memories of battles fought and challenges faced. She could see the pack stirring in the distance, their movements cautious, wary after Mora's betrayal. Miller watched her, eyes unrelenting, and Isla finally met his gaze. There was acknowledgment there, not just of the battle, not just of the threat, but of the bond between them, raw and unspoken. The air hummed with possibilities, with the pull of desire and responsibility, of trust earned and tested. "Tonight," he said finally, voice low, almost intimate. "We train, but after that we need to talk about us, about the bond, about what you mean to this pack, and to me." Isla's pulse quickened. The words hung in the air, unclaimed yet impossible to ignore. She nodded, a mixture of fear and anticipation threading through her. "We'll talk," she whispered, but the weight of the promise pressed on her like the forest shadows themselves. As the sun rose fully, spilling golden light across the clearing, Isla realized something. The fight wasn't over. Mora had been a symptom, not the disease, and the true challenge, navigating the dangerous pull between Miller, the pack, and her own heart, was only beginning. Tonight would reveal more than strength. It would reveal truths, and Isla knew she was ready, even if the shadows of desire threatened to consume her completely. Chapter 18. Flames of Temptation. The night settled over the pack lands like a velvet cloak, thick with the scent of pine, wet earth, and the faint tang of wolf musk. Isla could feel the tension in every shadow, every rustle of leaves, and in the subtle vibrations beneath her feet. Even the moon, high and pale, seemed to observe, its light filtering through the canopy, to cast ghostly patterns on the forest floor. Miller stood beside her at the training ground, muscles taut, senses alert. The night was theirs alone, or at least it should have been, but neither of them could ignore the electricity crackling between them, an unspoken current that threatened to sweep away every carefully maintained boundary. "You've improved since last week," Miller said, voice low, almost a growl. His amber eyes lingered on hers, assessing, daring. "Faster reflexes, sharper instincts, but your control is still questionable." Isla swallowed hard, heat creeping to her cheeks. "I'll improve," she said, trying to mask the flutter in her chest, the way his presence made her pulse uneven. "I can handle more than you think." He tilted his head, a shadow of a smirk crossing his features. "Is that a challenge, Luna?" His tone carried a teasing edge, but the weight behind his gaze made it impossible to treat lightly. The air thickened, charged with anticipation, as they began the drills. Isla moved with precision, her movements fluid and sharp, yet she was acutely aware of him, the brush of his arm when he corrected her stance, the slight shift of his body that mirrored her own, the sound of his breath syncing with hers in the cool night air. A sudden shift in the shadows made her freeze. The packlands were never truly quiet at night, but this was different, dangerous. Someone or something was watching, waiting. Miller's hand closed over hers, grounding her. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice rough with restrained emotion. "Don't let your focus wander." The word sent shivers down her spine, pulling her closer, yet her instinct screamed caution. The pull of the bond between them throbbed relentlessly, demanding recognition, pushing them both into a dance neither fully understood but couldn't resist. As they circled each other, practicing defensive moves, Isla felt the closeness of his body, the brush of his fingers as he corrected her stance, the steady heat radiating from him. Every touch, every glance, every unspoken word fanned a slow burning fire that threatened to consume her. "You're thinking too much," Miller murmured, voice low, almost intimate. "Feel it, don't fight it." Isla's heart raced, caught between the desire to obey and the instinct to resist. The bond was no longer subtle. It demanded attention, threading itself through every nerve, every breath. Her mind flared with confusion, desire, fear, and an undeniable longing tangled into one impossible knot. Suddenly, a sharp howl echoed through the forest, slicing the night air. Both of them tensed, senses snapping into alert mode. It was no ordinary threat. This was a challenge, a warning. Someone or something was encroaching on their territory. Miller's eyes darkened. "Stay close," he said, voice commanding. "I won't let anything happen to you." Isla felt a shiver run through her, not entirely from fear. His words carried both protection and a silent promise, a tether between them that neither could ignore. She nodded, heart pounding, the bond throbbing as if it had a life of its own. They moved together, shadows in the forest, alert to every sound, every flicker of movement. The forest seemed alive, watching, anticipating the storm that was about to hit. And in that charged silence, Isla realized that the real battle wasn't outside, lurking in the shadows. It was inside her. Between fear and trust, resistance and surrender, the flames of temptation burned hotter with each step she took beside Miller. Tonight's survival would demand more than strength. It would demand courage, instinct, and an honesty she had long buried, the truth of the bond, the pull of desire, and the risk of letting her heart beat in sync with his. And somewhere in the darkness, something waited, patient, hungry, and inevitable. Chapter 19. The Shadowed Threat. The forest had shifted again, darkened with the promise of danger. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig felt amplified, vibrating through Isla's senses like a warning drum. The moon hung low, casting silver slivers of light that barely penetrated the dense canopy. Somewhere in the shadows, eyes glimmered, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Miller moved beside her, a living shield of taut muscles and coiled power. Even as his presence offered safety, it also reminded her of the bond that pulsed between them, relentless and demanding. The unspoken tension between them made her chest ache, each heartbeat a reminder of the closeness she both feared and craved. "Something's out there," Miller murmured, his tone low, edged with authority and barely contained emotion. His senses were attuned, every subtle movement around them registered with precise clarity. "It's not just a rogue, it's organized, calculated. They know we're here." Isla's hands tightened into fists, nails biting into her palms, grounding herself. She had trained for moments like this, but the bond added another layer of complexity. Every instinct screamed caution, yet it was impossible to ignore the pull that threaded through her, entwining her with Miller's strength. The first strike came silently. A shadow surged from the underbrush, faster than the eye could follow. Isla's body reacted instantly, reflexes honed by months of training, shifting into her wolf form mid-leap. Her senses expanded, every sound, every scent heightened, every movement crisp and clear. Miller was already beside her, teeth bared, claws slicing through the darkness as he intercepted the threat. Their coordinated attack was seamless, yet each motion carried an undercurrent of tension, of power and trust, desire and restraint, the delicate balance that tethered them both. "You're stronger than I thought," Miller murmured, his voice brushing against her ear, hot and intense. Isla could feel the heat radiating from him even through her wolf form, a constant reminder of the bond that refused to be ignored. But the fight was far from over. More shadows moved in the distance, encircling them like predators waiting for the moment to strike. Isla's mind raced, heart hammering, not just from adrenaline, but from the awareness that each movement, each touch of Miller's, was stirring something deeper. Desire, connection, and a dangerous curiosity that threatened to consume her focus. "Stay close," Miller commanded, voice sharp, leaving no room for argument. "I can't protect you if you stray." Her eyes met his, even in wolf form, and she understood the weight behind his words. They were more than a warning, they were a promise, an admission of vulnerability and protection intertwined. And though she longed to test the boundaries, to explore the pull of the bond fully, the threat around them left no room for hesitation. Together they fought, moving as one through the shadows. Each enemy taken down brought a brief, tense calm, only to be shattered by another wave, and with each clash Isla felt the bond pulse hotter, more insistent, as if it had its own heartbeat, syncing with hers and Miller's, demanding acknowledgement and surrender. Then, in the fleeting silence between attacks, a figure stepped from the shadows, watching, smiling, a hint of malevolence that made Isla's fur bristle. Whoever they were, they knew them, knew the bond, and intended to use it. "Isla," Miller's growl was low, dangerous, and protective all at once. "This is far from over. Whoever's behind this, they're coming for more than just us. They're coming for everything we care about." Her heart thudded, not just from fear, but from a realization she couldn't ignore. Survival depended not only on strength and skill, but on trust. Trust in herself, in Miller, and in the bond that refused to let her turn away. As the figure in the shadows melted back into the night, Isla knew one undeniable truth. The war had only just begun, and in its fire every secret, every hidden desire, every unspoken bond would be tested to its limits. Tonight the shadows had spoken, tomorrow the consequences would come. Chapter 20. The Bond's Reckoning. The wind carried the scent of rain and earth, thick and electric, as Isla and Miller stood atop the ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the rogue forces had gathered, a dark tide poised to swallow everything they had fought to protect. The full moon, a brilliant silver disk, hung low, illuminating the tense landscape, casting long wavering shadows that danced like specters across the treetops. Isla's heart raced, not from fear, but from the surge of power that pulsed through her veins. The bond with Miller throbbed relentlessly, a living thread connecting them, feeding strength and urgency into both their bodies. She could feel every heartbeat, every controlled breath, every coiled muscle of the Alpha beside her. They were not merely allies, they were one in instinct, one in purpose. "They're waiting for us," Miller murmured, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the enemy lines. His presence radiated authority, yet beneath the hard edge Isla sensed a current of vulnerability. The weight of responsibility, the guilt of past mistakes, and the undeniable pull of their bond, all collided in a single palpable tension between them. "I won't let them take anything from us," she whispered, her voice carrying a resolve she barely recognized as her own. Her claws dug into the soft soil, grounding herself, anchoring to the moment. Miller's gaze softened, if only for a heartbeat. "And I won't let anything happen to you. Not tonight, not ever." The words were more than promise. They were a confession, a surrender to the bond that had haunted and haunted them in equal measure. Then, without warning, the attack began. Shadows surged up the slopes like waves, snarls and growls splitting the night air. Isla shifted, her wolf form erupting around her like liquid silver, senses expanded, muscles taut. Miller followed, his form a towering contrast of lethal grace and raw power. They moved together seamlessly, instinct and bond dictating every step, every strike. The first wave hit hard. Rogues pressed forward, snarling and snapping, but Isla and Miller were already in motion, a synchronized force of fury and precision. Teeth and claws met flesh and bone, a brutal dance under the moonlight. Each blow, each counter, each leap forward was intensified by the bond, fueling strength, clarity, and resolve. Isla's mind remained razor sharp amid the chaos. She scanned, calculated, adapted. Every move Miller made was mirrored, anticipated, complemented. They were not just fighting, they were rewriting the rules of survival, two hearts and minds fused into one relentless entity. And then, through the din of battle, Isla caught sight of the mastermind, an unfamiliar figure cloaked in shadow, orchestrating the assault from a safe distance. Rage bubbled, but it was tempered by focus. This enemy, whoever they were, had underestimated the bond, underestimated the power that surged through them. With a shared glance, Isla and Miller surged toward the figure. Their movement was fluid, unstoppable, every step a testament to their unity. The rogues' defenses fell before them, weak and disorganized in the face of a bond that demanded acknowledgement. Finally, the mastermind was cornered, forced to confront the full measure of their strength. Isla stepped forward, her eyes blazing, heart hammering, not with fear but with the clarity of purpose. "You miscalculated," she said, voice low but unwavering. "This bond, it's not something you can break." The figure faltered, and in that instant, Miller was at her side, teeth bared, claws poised together. They were unstoppable. With one final strike, the threat was neutralized, the shadows dispersed, leaving the valley silent except for the ragged breaths of the victors. They shifted back into human form, side by side, sweat and blood mingling, heart still pounding. Miller reached for her hand, fingers curling around hers, anchoring her in the aftermath of battle. The bond pulsed warmly, insistently, as if urging confession, closure, and acknowledgement. "You're mine," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. Not because of obligation, not because of the pack, but because of this. He pressed his forehead to hers, letting the bond speak what words could not. Isla's breath caught, and finally, after months of resistance, fear, and uncertainty, she surrendered, not out of weakness, but out of understanding. The bond had been their crucible, testing them, breaking them, and ultimately forging something unbreakable. "I'm yours," she whispered back, feeling the power of the bond settle, solidify, and claim its rightful place between them. The moon cast its silver glow over the valley. Now calm, the first rays of dawn touching the horizon. The battle was over, but the bond, the love, and the promise of shared strength were only beginning. Together, Isla and Miller stood as equals, not merely survivors, but as two halves made whole, ready to face whatever came next, not as enemies, not as victims, but as partners bound by choice, power, and heart. The shadows had tested them, the threats had tried to break them, and yet through fire and fear, through pain and desire, they had emerged stronger, united, and irrevocably bound. And in that quiet morning, with the pack safe and the bond blazing between them, they finally understood the truth. Some connections are forged not by fate alone, but by the trials that demand everything and return even more.